Hello, and welcome to For the Glory,
Episode 3.
As always, I'm your host, Axe Chris. Today, we're going to be looking at the lore that I missed in Episode 2, leading to the third job advancement and the skills that come with it. Bear in mind that this lore comes in the form of a quest line, so I'll be trying my best to summarize it without going too far into detail. As for corrections, it's been pointed out to me that second job's attacker mode gives plus 10 attack and not 10%. But that's about it. Anyway, let's jump into this. At the end of the previous episode, we stopped after Kyle and Veldaroth finished their little hunting race after Tyr went off to learn about being a Nova idol. Veldaroth got a bit tilted at the fact that he wasn't the strongest of the trio and stormed off. Left to his own thoughts, Kyle believes that being Kaiser holds great responsibility, which, to be fair, does. He decides to help the Nova with said newfound responsibilities by starting with Kylan, a scientist located in the Great Temple. He asks Kyle to retrieve 50 alert Growler stalks to make some medicine. After Kyle quickly rounds up the materials, Kylan sends them over to Cartalion. As per standard quests, Cartalion requests for Kyle to hunt a bunch of Kaloons in the eastern forests. Cartalion mentions the sudden emergence of the Angelic Buster, who totally isn't Tyr, but for the sake of dropping the facade, it's totally Tyr. Kyle wonders if she's a good influence on the Nova before being tasked to see Fennel. Fennel gets the idea that Cartalion wants her to tell him to lead the Knights. However, she carefully gets the message across that she doesn't believe Kyle is quite ready for that kind of leadership position. She goes on about how Kyle and Tyr are quickly approaching their destinies, how Kaiser seeks to fulfill the people's expectations, and how Tyr seeks to prove herself in her own way. But Fennel seems to believe that's not their intended path. But enough of that! Kyle senses a fight! He finds a group of nefarious priests and promptly dispatches them. After they escape, he immediately tells Cartalion, only to fall on deaf ears. He sends Kyle to check in on the sanctums. He visits both Honor and Christina, warning them of a potential attack, with both making Kyle do fetch quests because of reasons. Kyle finishes up with Christina's quest and is about to go to the West Sanctum to warn Ismael, but enough of that! Priests! Anyway, Kyle goes off to warn Cartalion on the way to the West Sanctum. Unfortunately, Ismael is nowhere to be seen and the relic is completely gone. Through the power of plot, Kyle finds another group of priests and proceeds to eliminate them. He goes back to report to Cartalion and Fennel about the second missing relic. As it turns out, the shield surrounding Pantheon is powered by 4 relics, one of which being the Soul Shooter. With it being fused to Tyr, the Nova are already down 1. With the priest stealing the Sugar Cube, that leaves the shield at half power, allowing for Darmor's forces to start invading. Thankfully, the base of the priest was found. Cartalion gives Kyle 3 missions. Take out 100 of them, get the Sugar Cube, and find out who's behind all this mess. To skip ahead, Kyle finds a priest at the back of the hideout talking to a hologram. Surprise! It's Magnus. Fully aware of the weakened shield, he starts sending specters into Pantheon. Cartalion sends Kyle to check by the sanctums. To sum it up, forces start coming in, and Kyle will have to deal with about 11 waves of specters as backup for the Knights in various areas of Pantheon. However, Kyle becomes ambushed and swarmed after the final wave, almost being defeated until the shield comes back on, vaporizing them immediately. Kyle then hatches a plan. Lower the shield on purpose. Once enough specters come into Pantheon, activate it again, and zap a good majority of them. Not knowing much about critical thinking and how risky this plan could be, Kyle goes through with it and tells Fennel. One would imagine that this would involve killing mobs for a stolen magic amplifier, but thankfully, Kylan just has it on hand. He gives Kyle the amplifier and Kyle gives it to Cartalian to hand it off to Captain Piston, hoping this plan works. Kyle goes out to fend off the remaining specters which somehow resisted the shield. He gets to the end, and then suddenly, him.
Only to find you attacking my minions.
Magnus himself shows up at the edge of the shield, wielding the Kaisarium. Veldaroth and Tyr bring up the rear shortly after and attempt to attack the Tyrant. Somehow, Magnus completely wrecks Veldaroth and Tyr using some kind of electrical attack, but Kyle takes the brunt of it. Cartalian shows up and Magnus vanishes like a coward. So, at this point, Pantheon is in danger of being invaded by Darmor's forces after the shield's energy is lowered. Additionally, Magnus is revealed to have stolen the Kaisarium, corrupting it in the process. All the while, Kyle is nowhere near the strength where he needs to be. Kyle seems to be oblivious to the current dire situation, but he does care more about checking on his friends. Kyle heads over to the hideout to check in on Veldaroth after the fight, wondering why Tyr is also beat up. Veldaroth reaches his boiling point, revealing that how he hates Kyle for having the power of Kaiser dumped in his lap when he feels that he was undeserving. Kyle checks in on Tyr to see why she's all beat up and bruised. Of course, Tyr has to come up with some excuse, so she says she trips on some blades and rocks and whatever. And of course Kyle buys it. But going back to Veldaroth, he gets a bit mad about how apparently he's using his Kaiser powers to joke with Tyr. So, as a result, he reveals that he's leaving the Halcyon Protector Vanguard to set out for power and strength and to one-up Kyle! The last part of this arc is Kyle helping Kylan and Beldar to open up the interdimensional portal via fetch quests. The door is explained by Fennel as being related to Darmor, Chronica, and Aeona, but Kyle doesn't seem to understand much of it. After that, Maple World is now officially accessible, along with the other moons near Grandis. Beldar relays to Kaiser that in order to defeat Darmor, Kyle and Tyr will have to set out from Pantheon to find help from an alliance that would be willing to come together and defeat the mad Florin Prince. So Kyle sets out into an unknown world. And then Kyle eventually gets to level 60 and snaps his fingers, getting his third job skills. So, let's go over what upgrades we get. Attacker Mode 2 has an attack power increase of 15, crit rate by 5%, and boss damage by 5%. Defender Mode 2 increases your def by 200. Dragon Slash 2 gives you a 70% damage increase at the max level of 2, as well as a new swinging effect. Advanced Inner Blaze increases strength by 30 and HP by 30% at level 10. Now, let's get into the new things. As always, skill explanations are at max level. Curse Bite is an active buff that lasts 4 minutes, increasing abnormal status resistance by 60, elemental resistance by 60%, and final damage against normal monsters with abnormal status by 25%. This goes particularly well with your bossing skill in 4th job. Wing Beat is an attack which sends out a whirlwind, which attacks for 40 ticks at 200% damage, with a 40% chance to apply a slow status effect. It's important to note that the whirlwind has multiple circumstances for dissipating, such as when a certain number of attacks are made, a set distance is traveled, or if the duration of the whirlwind itself expires. 2 whirlwinds max can be sent out. Pressure Chain is an attack that transforms your sword into an expanding chain sword, jutting it out to penetrate, then pull in up to 8 enemies for 280% damage 2 times, giving a 95% chance to stun them. Stone Dragon is your new best friend. For 60 seconds, it'll attack up to 8 enemies with 400% damage with a 75% chance to give them a 3-second slowdown. This is a skill that you'll definitely want to use later. Also, there's no cooldown, so you can just spawn it wherever you want, whenever you want. Catalyze is a passive that just straight up gives you 30% attack power, 20% crit rate, and 20% final damage. Self-Recovery is also a simple passive which heals 5% HP and MP every 4 seconds, regardless if you're in combat or not. Now, it's time for the big one. Final form. When your morph gauge is flashing red like this, hit this skill to finally transform into your Kaiser state. Except you'll immediately notice that the gold trim is missing. Instead, you'll have a cream-colored trim. Unfortunately, you aren't quite as powerful as it seems yet. You'll have to get to 4th job in order to fully harness
the power!
You get 60 seconds with a 10% boost to final damage and 100% knockback resistance. Also, you get to ignore those pesky enemy conditions such as attack ignore and attack reflect. When you get into 4th job, it's boosted to 15% final damage. When in the Kaiser state, it's important to know that your hitbox is drastically bigger than it is in the Nova state. Nexon has yet to find a solid, permanent solution to this issue when it comes to new content and how having an extra thick hitbox in bullet hell bosses works out, but that's another topic for another time. All your attacks have unique effects in the Kaiser state. Dragon Slash just does all 3 slashes in one press, Wing Beat has larger whirlwinds, Airlift has its own unique effect, and so on. You won't be able to use Vertical Grapple, but instead, we'll be able to use a straight-up teleport by pressing the transformation button again. It's quite useful in terms of mobility. That's gonna do it for this episode of For the Glory. For episode 4, there's a chance I might split everything into 2 parts. As always, I intend to cover lore and skills, but I'd also like to include a brief look at Kaiser's Magnus prequests. If you know why I'd want to split the episode into 2. If you don't, well, you'll see why. I hope to get this out to you all as soon as I can. Until next time!